Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live stream. We're delighted you're able to join us today. We are thrilled to be hosting Michael and Natalie McManus for this wonderful live stream where they get to talk about how it is that you may be able to modify those games that were published inside of their very exciting book if you are training by yourself. So first of all, I want to thank you both so very much. That book is so awesome. Thank you so very much
Thank
for
you.
offering that for our community because whew, it is good stuff, particularly for instructors. And yes, Mimi is saying hello. Hello, Mimi. We're
Hi.
delighted to have you see us and be here. And this is exactly what we want you guys to do. Please participate inside of the chat. We have, well, not the chat necessarily, the comments. We have this on the Network University Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. So we definitely want to see all you guys. Hello, Kiki. We love it that you bought the book. Fantastic. So, what do you guys want everyone to know about the book as an overall? When they are buying the book or when they're thinking about buying the book, what do you want them to think about the book itself? That made sense. That was
Yeah.
English.
I think one thing that I think we'd both like to say is thank you. Like, we've had an overwhelmingly positive response. Lots and lots of people telling us they're loving it, having fun playing the games. Um, what's the one thing that we want people to know when they buy the book? It is written for instructors, but I don't think it's inaccessible to anybody. And if you train with a group, it's going to make your group training sessions more entertaining, more provocative in terms of thought provoking and structured. I often find that when people create training groups for themselves, they're very unstructured, and sometimes that's not the best environment to train dogs in. But if you have these games, sometimes that structure can help a lot. What would you say?
Yeah, I think, we don't want anyone to feel like they have to follow any of the game rules strictly. We want people to be creative
Yeah.
With the sort of, formats and ideas that we put out. But it's not like you have to, follow the letter of the law there at all. And so we hope people are creative and thinking of ways to modify and improve and have fun with the games and, maybe play them the base version and then try something else. And, just because we said something doesn't mean you have to do it that way. So
yeah, it's the spirit of the game, really, that we wanted to impart. And if you read the introductory sections of the book, I think we explain that pretty clearly, that it's about the stress that just playing a game generates. Yes. And not like the, particular specific details. One thing that I've noticed, so I have a challenge group that I do for my students. And one thing that I notice is if I make a video of the challenge, people duplicate it. If I don't make a video of the challenge, we get so many diverse different interpretations of what I said, which is great. And then some people are annoyed, like, oh, I didn't know that's what you meant. It's like, it's not what I meant, actually. You did the right thing. You just used what you interpreted and had fun with it. And now, instead of a bunch of people replicating what I did, you have 8 different versions of something for you to go home and play with 8 new things instead of just one thing. So
yeah, something we talked about quite a bit in the webinar last week was about messing with the point systems and what a big difference in incentives and stress that can make. And even just that small of a change can be really useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, one of the things that I think you just touched upon that people stress about, particularly when they're training on their own, is they're so worried about doing something wrong because maybe they're not working with an instructor. Maybe they have just been self taught up until a point, or maybe they see their instructor once a month or every once in a while. So, how can you set those people at ease? Like, okay, I'm not going to completely destroy my training by trying to do this on my own.
Absolutely. I would say the number one thing you're at risk of training on your own is actually not it's not like that you're going to ruin them. It's that you're going to actually hold yourself and your dog back. The number
Doing
one,
the same thing over and over.
It's the same thing, and also the same locations over and over again. So I see a lot of people who train a lot at home, and they're very frustrated when they come to a class or go to a workshop because the dog doesn't do as well. And it's like, yeah, if you come to a weekly class, just that experience of going to that new location makes a big difference in terms of your dog's ability to generalize what you're teaching them. But yeah, so like, what can I say to you to put you at ease is it doesn't have to be complicated.
But the dog does benefit from variety.
Exactly. Give your dog as much variety as you can, but that doesn't mean it has to be hard. Like, I think that's where people get it wrong, is they start doing hard things, and it's like, don't do that. Just make it easy, especially if you've been training on your own at home for a long time. You may think your dog has the skills that they don't have. And then you set things that you think they should be able to do in a new location, and they fall flat. You didn't
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the big things that I think people, because that's a really important point, as far as where we are having time to practice, a lot of people are trying to fit this in. So home is really easy. Okay, I'm going to slide this in when I can. So would one of the things potentially for people who are buying the book, who are really trying to wrap their head around this, potentially just see, can you go to a friend's house and do some of the searches you've been doing already? And can the dog do these things? And just having your friend just watching, like the friend isn't doing anything, but they're just watching you. Would that be enough of an increase in the stress level where they could be like, okay, now we can kind of play with that a little bit, where maybe the friend could be incorporating some of the aspects that you were talking about in the book? Would that be something that they could try?
Yeah, I mean, the changes can be so minor. Like honestly, one of the most stress-inducing things is just film yourself and then watch it, and then if that stress gets you get used to that stress, post that online. Oh my goodness, that'll freak out. And you don't even have to leave home for that stress. But if you are staying at home, these games can offer enough variety for you to dredge out a little bit more value from being at home. If like maybe if it's a winter time or a summertime, you can't go out. You really should go out as much as you can, but the games can offer a little.
Yeah, it can. If the handler hasn't been trying different things that they're doing during the search,
Yes.
Some of the games we're going to go through are fairly focused on that, and that can be a really big change for the dog if they've only seen their handler be the same way all the time.
Perfect. So did you guys want to share some of the images that you put together? Would that be a good thing to do now?
Yeah, I think one of the things before we get into the images, one of the things we wanted to do is, because that was the number one criticism that we got on the book, was that there wasn't a lot of resources if you just want to play on your own. And to us, like, because we've been playing these games for so long, it was just kind of obvious to us. So we were, oh yeah, of course we need to add this to the book. So we've added a supplementary material that'll be included for everyone who has already purchased the book or is going to purchase the book.
Yeah, we're going to send out an email for the people who already have, and then for people who buy it after that, it will be included. Yeah,
you're going to get a whole page detailing modifications. A whole 3 pages showing how to modify games for single player versions. And
again, any way you want to modify yourself,
absolutely,
or recombine or whatever is great.
Yeah, because a lot of these games work well in combination with one another. They're not standalone things that can't be mixed.
Yeah, do we have your picture too, Diana, to be able to show that?
Yes.
Great.
Yep.
At some point. Not right now.
So you guys are all going to get that. And we went through the book to look at how many of the games we thought were really easy to adapt to just playing as training drills by yourself. A lot of these games were just training drills that weren't meant to be competitive in any way or done in a group setting necessarily. And we found about, 15
plus
of them.
Some other variations.
So just a little less than half the games that we have in the book were like real easy to do. And so we were really happy, like, you can totally do these on your own.
All right. You want to start going through them then?
Yeah, we can start going through the games. And we're just going to kind of, obviously a lot of this information is in the book. So you should definitely get the book if you don't have it. But we wanted to kind of spell out some of these things for you guys.
And we have this sheet that we're going to go through is really talking about how you modify it. It's not going through the whole rules of the game again.
Absolutely. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start from this image or from the top? Or
why don't we... Do you mind jumping around a little? We can start from the image and then go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So this is a picture of one way to set up the hide sweeper game. And so you've got a row of open containers. That's how we recommend setting it up. We usually number them for ease of telling which container you're calling.
Otherwise, of course, if you're doing this on your own non-blind, you don't need to number.
You don't have to, but you might go, oh, wait, maybe I did think it was that one. So it can kind of help keep you honest as well.
Yeah.
So it might be worth doing. So when you're starting this game, you want to try to set up where you have clear downwind. You can see the wind at the top toward the start line.
Yeah. And just to give you an explanation of what's happening here is that neither the dog or handler are allowed on the bucket side of the cones. And so the idea, and we often do this in our intro class, like with dogs on primary. And what I want their owners to see is how much information the dog is giving you before you cross that line. And it's so cool to see the dogs going like, oh, it's 3, it's 3, it's 3, and like pulling the owner to it. And the dog can show you how wide the odor cone is, or narrow if it's a windy day. And
or if there's more of an angle to the wind than you thought there was.
Exactly. If the wind's coming at an angle, it's like, oh, it looks like they're pointing at number 2, but the wind's coming at an angle. So there's so many concepts to use, even without it being blind. Yeah. It's a super valuable game.
Yeah, there's actually only very little value to doing this blind, in that you get to test yourself a little bit extra.
And it's fun.
You can, but you can learn all of the reading stuff by yourself. And of course, with all of these, we recommend videoing. And as you and the dog get better at this, you can make it a little bit more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So to set this up, would it be for someone who's training on their own, and maybe they're like, oh God, I don't know what direction wind is going. So would they be able to use those little Ryobi Fab fans or floor fans in order to produce the wind direction that they're looking for?
I don't like that. I'm not a big fan of using a whole bunch of equipment, but if you have trouble knowing which way the wind is blowing, that's even better, because what you can do is you can set up a setup like this, and instead of having a line, have a circle around the search area. Walk around the circle and let your dog tell you which way the wind's blowing. See, is there one part of the circle where your dog says, oh my gosh, there's something in there, and there's another part of the circle where the dog says, yeah, I don't smell anything. And so you can start to develop a sense of wind. Honestly, I have a lot of students. If you think you don't know which way the wind's blowing, I have a lot of students. You go to a class and you say, which way is the wind blowing? Everyone's pointing a different direction, right? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But it's not important, because your dog will tell you if you're paying attention. And this game is not about being the best at determining wind direction. It's about being the best at reading your dog.
Yeah. And so if you were to set it up like this and then see nothing from your dog, I would
Switch
try going,
yeah,
equidistance the other side. See if that gives you information. And then if not, maybe reset the containers a little bit. But like, say it's the middle of winter and your only option is inside. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely use fans. I don't have anything against fans. They can be a stronger visual for the handler, because you tend to get a more clear and direct odor picture. But I do want the handlers to push themselves to try to figure out more about what's going on with the wind outside. Now, wind also likes to change, and it likes to be different in different areas that are very close together. So it can be very difficult to set this up, but I think it's also a good education for the handler to work on getting good at setting this up.
And I think this is one of the great examples of why the games are so incredibly valuable and what it is they're doing. When we say, it almost turns into like a throwaway phrase of, oh, it's teaching skills for the dog and the handler. No, literally, like you are actually learning so much with this game as a handler.
Yeah. And I think that fear of like not knowing the wind or how it's going to work, that fear, that is exactly what it is. That's the learning potential. We tend to be afraid of the unknown, but it's only unknown until you know it. And when you play these games, you will start to know it, and that fear will go away. So don't let that fear hold you back. Have some fun with it. The dog's not going to get mad at you.
And then this becomes something that you can see in trial, which is awesome. When you can go, oh, this is the predominant wind in this, at least this part of the search area. That can help give me information about what the downwind side is. If I do need to make any modifications to my handling, hope maybe the dog can get themselves to the downwind side. But if we can have that info, we can be more useful teammates as well.
And if you're afraid of a game like this, like one of the number one things that people are afraid of in this is over frustrating the dog. That the dog is trying to get to the odor, and we're denying them that by holding the leash. Well, for one, guess what? You're doing that in trial, and your dog is frustrated. So your dog needs to develop some frustration tolerance. But you can, even though when I do this in workshops, I push that frustration boundary as far as I can push it. You can, on your own, if you're worried about that, give yourself 5 seconds. You can 5 seconds to observe the dog's behavior, then cut them loose. And then the next time you try it, try 10 seconds. And so you start to slowly build that frustration tolerance and giving yourself more and more time to read the dog's behavior. And if you do that right, you will build so much drive that your dog, you can hold them for 30 seconds and the dog's gonna be like, it's there, let me go already. Yeah.
And you want to be aware of your timing, that, you want to release the dog to go and find the hide for themselves, when they're engaged with it, not when they've given up and are looking at you, then you maybe went a little too long for that dog in that moment. So picking the moment of releasing the dog is very important.
So if that were to happen, let's say that they were like, okay, I'm trying to push myself. I'm trying to make sure I don't let them go in 1 second. And they happen to wait a little bit longer where the dog is like, okay, I told you it was over there. Mom, what is going on?
Mhm.
So would at that point, would they be maybe circling around the whole space and starting over? What would you recommend in that moment?
Yeah, there are a lot of choices. Honestly, probably the number one most productive one is just wait for your dog to give it to you again, because most dogs will give it to you again. But there are lots of other choices. You can circle them back around. You can do a hard restart, pull them back. Ready, ready, ready. Okay, go get it again, right? And this time I really will listen. I promise. You can put the dog away for a certain time, bring it back. You can pair it, add food to it. You can do so many things. Sorry.
Yeah, another important thing is that you have enough leash tension that when you tell the dog that they can search, they don't go and bang on the end of the line if you're not letting them pass that line. So make it so they're not going to feel corrected or hurt themselves or anything.
Yes.
You want to be far enough back from the line that you feel like you have some play with the leash, because otherwise, as humans, we're gonna go, oh my gosh, we're getting to the line, and then yank the dog all of a sudden.
That is the number one error that the handler makes in this game, is allowing the dog to get yanked by the leash instead of holding a constant steady pressure on the dog, which this is also going to help you develop line feel. And usually in workshops, when I do this game, I springboard off of it to teach line feel.
So if someone is by themselves, is there a way that they would be able to practice that, potentially having, if they don't have anyone to practice with at all? One of the things I try to tell people is potentially you can have your leash, your long line wrapped around a doorknob or something where you can kind of figure that out. Is there some other thing that they'd be able to practice, that whole idea of having that constant tension on the line and then feeding it out through their fingers, as opposed to the, I'm just going to let it go and then I'm going to hold on to real quick and the dog's like, oh.
We love fences.
Yeah.
Or crates if they're not going to move around too much. And the handler practicing backing up and then coming back in on the line and coming in and out at different angles so that you can work on that tension piece, and also the reeling it in with the backhand, which is often where we get messed up, where all of a sudden there's extra line and the dog hits it.
Yeah.
So it's not as great as something moving in front of you, but it still will help.
But you can do it with something moving on your own in inverse. So if you have like a dolly or rolling luggage or something like that you can attach the leash to, you can practice how much tension does it take to move, and notice that a lot of tension will move a lot more unstably and cause bouncing in the leash, and just develop leash feel. Like most of us developed leash feel from not following a dog around in nose work, but from teaching dogs obedience and how to walk on leash and things like that. Like you have to know how much pressure on the leash to give. I learned from horse training, and mostly I'm using the leash to control and communicate with the animal rather than for the animal to communicate with me. But the same skills work in reverse. So yes, you can definitely practice that.
We've got a good question here. Is the team moving parallel to the line or standing still to start? They could be doing either one here. But usually you would come from the left side here and you would be moving parallel to that line across until your dog catches the odor, because if you don't know which bucket it's in, or if you're pretending you don't know which bucket it's in, you want to be even across that line, especially if you were to be wrong about the wind and you might be standing somewhere the dog can't remotely catch the odor.
Yeah. And I would say when you're playing this game, the normal version where it's somewhat competitive or whatever, I like to let the teams experiment with different strategies to see which one will win, which one's fastest, which one is gives the dog the most security that they feel like they can communicate versus shut down. So people try a bunch of different strategies, and we usually give them 2 rounds to update their strategy with new information. And you can do that a little bit on your own and try it 3 or 4 times with different approaches. What if I stand still? What if I move back and forth? What if I move straight up and down? Like all these things will make a difference.
And what I really like about that is, again, because I always train by myself. I'm very antisocial. So I will do things by myself. But with this, you could also make it competitive for yourself, particularly if you're videoing, of saying, okay, it took me 15 seconds to figure out what was going on. Now I want to see if I can do this within 10 seconds. Would I be able to approach this a different way and doesn't make any difference. You can make it competitive for yourself if that is your jam.
Yes.
So that's what I think is so wonderful about what you guys are offering with this book. Again, if you guys haven't bought it yet, there's a link inside the comments. You definitely want to buy it. Is that there's so many wonderful ideas that we can come up with, regardless of whether you're an instructor, regardless of whether you're working with a group, or if you're working on your own, that you can stay inspired and you can customize this so very much. And if you start getting like, oh God, I have to do more training, you can then go to the like, I have an idea.
Yes.
And that's another fun thing, like for those who want to make it competitive, it doesn't have to be you being the competitive one. You guys are all obviously participating in an online community. Film your dog doing this game and clip off the end bit where your dog finds it and tell people who can guess which container it was in. Right? Make them compete. Now it's a bunch of fun, and it'll change your behavior when you're filming a demo for other people to guess. Your behavior will become a little bit more subtle, will become a little bit more conducive to the dog exploring instead of kind of like pointing your dog at the right box, which a lot of people will find themselves tempted to do. And that's a fun way to make it more real.
Yes, but I do love the idea of trying to beat yourself, because I think that's something that all of us can do, all of us who are competitive, which is most of us, to improve ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely can be, even for someone as aversive to competition as I am. it is absolutely, there's so much value in this, which is why I'm, again, very thankful that you guys, first of all, put out the book, but also that you're doing this live stream, because it's just so much goodness. Do you guys want to look at the next image? Were you all set for this one?
Yeah. Let's go to the next one.
We won't get through very many of these if we go this slow.
Yes. Okay, One Track Mind. So yeah, this one started as a training drill and only later became a game. And when I do my game workshops, it's usually the third game that I teach. And I tell people that it, like the other games were you competing against each other, this game is you competing against your dog. So it was always designed to be a single two-player game if you include your dog, right? But a single-player game with just one handler, one dog. It was meant for our students to take home and do at home.
Yeah, when it started out being a lot about speed, because handlers tend to move too quickly for their dogs in some cases, and then cause the dog to miss a hide because the dog couldn't process at the speed that the handler was moving. And also dogs tend to, if we speed up, they tend to go, oh, we're going somewhere, we're walking, maybe we're healing, how do I need to move with you?
Or it's a race, we're on.
And so letting the dog know, just because I move a little funny or a little fast doesn't mean you shouldn't respond to odor. And it also doesn't mean that I won't see you and respond. So in the original version, we had the teams start out just walking a little bit faster than they normally would. And if the dog missed the hide in the open container, then they have to loop all the way around back to the beginning. You're not turning around and just letting the dog go, oh, it was right here.
Because a lot of dogs are expecting when they miss a hide, they're going to be allowed to come back and get it. And
the handler's going to babysit them a little bit.
And so this sharpens up a dog that's like, now you got to get it on the first pass.
Yeah. So you come back around to the beginning, let the dog go. Usually, if they didn't get it the first time, they'll get it the second. And if not, maybe the third. Otherwise, the distraction was way too hard, whether it was speed or food in their face or whatever it might be.
And usually I do 3 repetitions and then I pair it. And then if that doesn't work, I put the dog away and then I bring them back out later with a reduced challenge.
Yeah. But then so say you're moving quickly and the dog goes, oh, wait, there it is. Then the handler whirls back and pays them. And, they get a huge reinforcement for having worked against the handler and the speed and all of that to get to odor. But then this can be expanded into whatever distraction you want. And when we're teaching a new distraction, we like to do it in a format similar to this because the area of the right answer should be so clear to the dogs. The dogs know what open containers are for. So it's easier for them to work against that and get the right answer versus if you're just like out in a parking lot trying to distract them. So it's a great way to, like, say you have something that distracts your dog in trial, come back and do it in this format and teach them how to work past that distraction.
I think this is just so incredibly brilliant. And also it can help handlers really think through what are some of the weird things that I may do, particularly at trial. So as an example, there, with scent work, with nose work trials, it's held in all kinds of weather. You may be training in your very nice climate controlled home. It's
Yeah,
very wonderful all the time. And then you go to a trial and it's basically a monsoon. So now you are wearing this giant poncho thing, maybe an umbrella, and you're just fumbling around. Your dog is like, what is wrong with you? Right? There's
Yes.
water falling off of you. You're trying to get into your tree pouch. You can't hold on to your stuff. So this would be a fantastic way of introducing your dog to, oh, look, I'm wearing 5 layers of clothing and I can't move as well. And I'm
Yeah.
cursing
Sure.
at myself. And oh, I have wet socks.
Yep, absolutely.
So this
Yes.
is a fantastic thing for us to do, and so simple to do on your own.
It
And-
really is.
And what I love about this is I did this once with one of my dogs, and it was fascinating. I had done all kinds of weird stuff. I have a very broken body all the time, so I'm always kind of limping around doing weird stuff. But I combined this with sounding like a zombie. So it was like the moaning while dragging my leg. And he stopped dead and was like, just looked at me as I like zombied by. He's like, oh my God, are you okay? He was so worried. But it was
Aw.
information for me, right? That now this is
Yes.
something I can work on. That if I'm that broken, this is not going to be good. So now we need to desensitize him to how broken I can
Yes,
be.
absolutely. We had a student come back from a trial once, concerned that her dog was responding negatively to the camera clicking.
Yeah, the
And
shutter sound.
Yeah, so we played that. Now it would have been better to have a real nice camera. We didn't have one of those at
We
class.
had cell phones.
So we made sounds with phones, and discovered that it actually wasn't the noise that was bothering him. It was actually the visual, which was great information, but so much easier to break out those different components with something like this.
Yes. No, I think this is absolutely fantastic. So we did have a question of where are you putting the distraction if it's an item and not just walking fast?
Kind of depends on what the distraction is.
It does, and it also depends on the skill of the dog. So, for example, let's say the distraction is a vacuum cleaner, which I've used before. There's some dogs who are very put off by vacuum cleaners. It might just be way off to the side in the corner of the room. That may be all we need. If it's a tennis ball, it could be in one of the containers or near the containers if your dog can handle that. And if your dog can't handle that, now we're very comfortable with the dog if it's a ball, the dog picking up the ball and then continuing to work with the ball in the mouth. And we find that our dogs can do that. Again, like these are templates for you guys to express your creativity on. Where are you putting the distraction? I should ask you, where are you going to put the distraction? Maybe I'll learn something from you. Maybe you'll come up with something more clever than I was able to come up with.
Now, usually when we start with a food distraction, it'll be in our hand first. We want to get through the basics of it being in the hand and the hand down near the dog's face and all that, and progressively, work that to something the dog has to, thinks they have a better chance at stealing. Although some dogs do think they have a good chance at stealing food in your hand, which is also why that's a good place to start.
Fantastic. And again, I love the thing that you're trying to stress here is that, again, guys, these are templates. And this is why this is, again, if you haven't bought the book, you have to buy the book because you can come back to these at any point. It's not like, oh, I played that game once. Now I just never need to do that again. No, you can use that forever in so many different ways. And you can use it throughout the whole part of your training, and you can create so many other things that then can potentially inspire maybe your friends who are also training. You can watch someone else do the same exact game, be like, I never thought of doing it that way. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's always really funny to me when I talk about this game with my students. And, we always show this diagram and we do this drill in all of our classes. So they've all seen that. And then when I find out, like, you guys haven't played this game in an interior with 5 heights, like, you thought it had to do with containers? No, like, forget even the buckets. That's not the important part. The important part is, can your dog work through a distraction of some kind?
Yeah, but you start here.
Yeah, this
then
is how
maybe
we
it's a
introduce it.
wall instead of containers. Then maybe it's the side of a vehicle, and then something more complicated as the dog proves their ability to work through those distractions.
Yes. And then the fact that you could then come back to this as oh yeah, I can totally do this. And then you're doing some other really wacky distraction for your part. It's
Yes.
just brilliance. It's absolutely brilliant. That's what I'm trying to say to everyone is that if you are working on your own, you have 2 very experienced instructors who put these games together that have been, developing this with their classes for a very long time. But now you can take this with the thought that they put behind as far as the whole purpose, and you can make it your own. It's just fantastic. It's very good stuff. Did you guys want to see the next image?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So this is separation anxiety, because we like tongue-in-cheek names for our games. And this is a game that is played in different ways in a few different venues. But basically, you have to let the dog go out away from you to find the hide, and you can't go with them. Now, depending on the venue, maybe you could choose to go into the next layer. I put the different lines there to just have reduced points, and that's how we listed it in the book. And that could be very much worth doing if your dog needs it. But we want people to see what their dog can do if they choose not to follow them. Again, as we say repeatedly in the book, that's not handling advice for a trial, unless you're in a trial where you have to do that for the game of the trial. But if your dog can't go out and find the hide without you, what is missing in their understanding of the game, in their foundation, in maybe what they think you want of them, that they wouldn't go. And you can also play around with difficulty in maybe the wind is blowing towards you the first time, and then maybe once you've worked up to a distance you're happy with, maybe now the wind is blowing the other direction and the dog has to get out there without the odor calling them. So there are endless options with this. I threw random objects that you might see out in a nosework search out there, but it could be whatever. It could be,
and it could be not an object, and the objects are between you and the hide. And so now there's an extra challenge of independence of leaving the objects, not just leaving you.
Yes.
Right. This is one of my favorite things. I love distance games. They're so much fun.
They are fun.
So the irony for me here is that, when we play this game in a game day and there's points involved and everything, that our students who want to baby their dogs all day long suddenly are unwilling to cross that line. Like the dog is like shutting down and begging for help. And we're like, God, help your dog. And they're just like, no, man, I'm not losing a point, like.
And that's an important thing to keep in mind, right? Is that when you guys are doing these games on your own, and this absolutely can be something that people are concerned about, right? Is like, okay, well, now I'm worried. Oh God, what happens if I'm in that situation? I'm sitting there, I'm trying to give points to myself and my dog is like screaming for help, but I want that point. Is that this is trying to give you the ability, and correct me if I'm wrong, of being able to make these decisions, of being able to balance reading your dog what they need, while also recognizing how you may have actually been capping off where you and your dog can go. Particularly if you have a dog who may have needed help in just life, it can be very scary for us to kind of grow that bubble. We figure out we're comfortable here. We're not having reactivity. We're not having fear, whatever the issue is. And this is great. This is comfy. Yeah, but it could be better if we make that bubble a little bit bigger, but that's going to require some learning and trying. And there's going to be some, growing pains. So I think that this is a wonderful way that you can, on your own, figure out how to do that, of how to kind of walk that line of allowing your dog and yourself to do learning. And learning is not always just unicorns and rainbows. Sometimes there is actually effort that goes into it. So can you touch upon that a little bit, particularly for this one, for people who may be like, well, now I'm worried that I'm going to somehow, not read my dog correctly?
Well, I think, so from my perspective, there's a couple important points to hit here. One point is that read the beginning of the book again. It's about stress and how your behavior is going to change due to stress. And so those handlers who don't want to cross that line now because they don't want to lose a point, that's how their handler is reacting to this specific kind of stress.
And they're willing to throw away all whatever, say 10 points versus taking 5 if they walked all the way up there.
Which, keep in mind, these points aren't actually worth anything.
but you can see the impact.
Yes.
And sometimes it's worth doing something that we wouldn't normally do to support the situation we're in, even if for us that reduces our internal points. Like if I had to do something to baby my dog in a trial, that reduces, even if I titled, even if I got first place overall, that would reduce my internal points of what happened that day. But it's also information for me. Okay, there was something missing here, something that's eroded in our foundation, in our communication, or whatever it is, that now I have the opportunity to go and fix this before the next time. Yeah. Some handlers may want to test where they are and start far and then work up if they need to. And other handlers may know this is a challenge, start closer, get some success at the distance you think your dog can do, and then start a couple feet back from that and try again.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of these games touch on strategy and the role the handler plays in the success of the dog. And there can often be a movement, and I'm often a part of this movement, of never help the dog ever. And I'm never going to, point out a corner that the dog missed, or, you know, hold the dog at the threshold, or whatever it is. And I can be that way, especially in training, but there's a time and a place to step in and help your dog as a strategy. And if you get too rigid, like, I don't think being rigid is ever the right solution. Always be flexible and be willing to compromise and do things. You can fix it later. Also, you know, for all those people who let their dog hang out to dry, nothing was lost. The dog was confused for a while, and then we re-jazzed them up, sent them back out, and they all were fine. They're like, okay, got it. And they also revealed something in the foundation that needed to be improved on. And then now they had a training plan to go home, and over the next week, they improved the dog's comfort of leaving the handler's side.
I think if someone really thinks that they might push this too far, they could set themselves a timer.
Yeah.
So if my dog hasn't, I'm setting a really simple hide. I'm starting 15 feet away or 35 feet away or whatever.
Takes longer than a minute.
Yeah.
We failed, and I'm going to just handle it.
I'm going to reassess. Maybe I'll give the dog a quick break and change the start line or whatever. But, you know, sometimes we don't know that it's been like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And so it can be worth having a way of helping ourselves keep track of how long we're pushing the dog to work on something.
And I think all that's really important. And also the fact that, again, guys, it's not as though you do this and then life ends, right? It's always the follow-up that's so important.
Yes.
And the fact that all of these things are providing you with information. And it may very well be like, I had no idea that we were really good at something.
Mm-hmm.
It's highlighting maybe some of my strengths, but also highlighting where things I may have assumed that this was going to be okay. I'll give a personal example, and then we can move on to the next image. Is my boy Valor was fantastic doing distance stuff, and I just took it for granted. But then we went to a trial where we actually had to do a distance game on grass at a training facility where there were lots of lovely little dog sniffy stuff all over the place. And all he had to do was go out a little bit, and I let him go, and he was like, grass. I'm like, this isn't going to happen. Let's not pee in the middle of this. Let's leash him back up and let's go back home. And it wasn't as though like that was it. We never did it ever again. This was information that I hadn't done that piece yet. He could do it in other instances, but where little girly dogs said, oh my God, I'm so cute. He's like, I think you're cute too. Mm-hmm. He couldn't do it, right? So really good information.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so we're going to go on to the next image.
Watch and learn. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is a game that if you've read the book, you know, we often play as a warm-up round.
Yeah, instead of warm-up boxes, because we are not fans of warm-up boxes. So we do this game.
Yes, and it's built to be non-blind. Yeah. So if you're playing this by yourself, there's very little difference except that you have to judge yourself that you're not breaking the rules.
Yeah.
And the rules are that you pick a spot around the outside of the circle, and then you release your dog to search. And once you have released them, once they've gone through those cones, you're not allowed to move or talk or gesture. And that can be really hard for handlers. We often have to remind them a number of times that they are wiggling, they're turning around, they're shifting their shoulders towards the hide.
Reaching for your treat pouch.
Maybe they're talking to, maybe the dog left the area because something else caught their attention and now they're talking to them and it's like, hey, you're still in the search. Let the dog do what they're going to do. Again, you can always set a time limit for yourself. We often run this as a 1-minute game because we're not trying to set up something super difficult with the odor, but we are wanting to see, this is in some ways very similar to the last game, that the dog can go and do it.
Yeah. This is an independence game. And to go back to your list of things that the handler does, in addition to that, things like getting frustrated, and getting excited. These little things, even if there's no external change, your dog knows. And when your dog goes off in the wrong direction and you get frustrated and maybe a little sigh comes out of you or something, or even if it doesn't, you can see the dog flatten out. It's pretty cool to watch in a group. I mean, it's cool. Like, it's sad, right? But it's also cool to see how responsive the dog can be to an emotional shift in the handler that isn't a physical shift.
Yeah, it really points out how much more careful we should be of managing our emotions and how we react to our dog. Like, is it the worst thing that they left the circle for 10 seconds? No. They may have needed to get out of the circle to work the airflow back into the circle. The reason it's called Watch and Learn is because in a group setting, we want people observing the teams that run before them and helping them pick their start point based on those other teams. which sometimes helps people, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes everyone gets an idea that something's working really well, and it's just happenstance. And if they actually someone else finally picks something else, like, oh well, that was actually the good point to start dogs from. And sometimes it's just the individual dogs, so you won't have that piece working it on your own, but you can still observe your dog. Or if you have multiple dogs, you can run multiple, you can try different spots, you can look at the differences between them. And another thing that normally when we're running it in a group, the handler doesn't call alert and then decide when they go in. The judge says verbally when the dog has sourced it.
Yeah,
so they'll
make
say
sure
pay,
you're not anticipating.
Pay or whatever. Because the handler often is like almost falling into the search area in anticipation.
And also sometimes like the dog's nose goes over the tin, but the dog hasn't found it. And if your criteria is always like, if the dog's nose accidentally hits a tin, then I pay them. I personally want some amount of recognition that the dog knows what they did.
Yeah, so that's another place where you can really watch yourself.
And if your dog has no recognition, you should be pairing it, by the way.
And maybe the air was wrong, and then they get around to the other side, and then they're on it. We also set it somewhere that the handler can see the tin. We don't want the handler guessing whether or not it was sourced. So like I've got it on top of a chair there. We don't put it under the chair where nobody can see whether or not it was sourced.
And a lot of dogs and handlers, when we do this in workshops, hit the rim of the chair and the handler wants to go in and pay. It's like, that's not where it is. You can see it. It's on top of the chair, but that's where the dog expects it to be. It provides a whole interesting extra conundrum. Yeah,
you can get lots of information about expectations, and dogs tend to have a lot of expectations about chairs and containers. And those are often a lot of the objects that we have in this setup.
So as far as someone working on this on their own, would you recommend that they do it a few times as far as videoing it and then maybe watching it and then running it again to see how they may be able to improve from run to run?
Yeah, definitely. I think probably the most important thing, I can't say this too much, and I get it. Not everyone is able to do this all the time, but the most important thing would be to go and change the setting, go somewhere new. You can do this on leash, even though the game is meant to be played off leash. Do it on leash sometimes, and that way you can do it at the park. And the key to this game, this is what really makes it different from the last game we talked about, is the handler not being allowed to move, gesture, or talk. Whereas in the other game, the handler is able to move, gesture, and talk. They're just not allowed to cross a line. And so that's a big difference for the dog.
But also for some dogs, like doing this in your living room or basement, they might get it really fast. And you take it out even just to your own yard, they might be terribly distracted. This is where they go to the bathroom. This is where they chase squirrels or whatever.
Or just not have the same level of confidence to leave you. Like maybe your backyard is not a problem, but you go to the park where they've never been before, and the dog's like, I don't know where I am. There's all sorts of things that can change the dog's confidence.
Yes, and we do like the handlers to try starting at different points around the circle to see how that impacts the dog. So
we have some new variations that we're going to send to everyone who bought the book that talk about that. Like if you're doing a non-blind, starting in places that you wouldn't choose to start intentionally.
Yeah, and then we have the variations are similar to the variations we have for the group version, but like having the handler sit down before they release the dog. So putting the chair in the spot that you want to start, going and sitting down and then releasing your dog is very different for a lot of dogs. They don't have the same idea about leaving their seated handler as they do their standing handler. Also, it's interesting to notice that a lot of handlers completely forget to sit down. They stand next to the chair and want to release the dog and then sit, and we have to remind them to sit first. And so that's something to watch in yourself as well. And you may not even notice. You may have to see the video and go, oh, I didn't even sit down before I released them. Yep. And it's always just interesting to notice what we do when we're trying to do something new because we default to so many of our usual habits.
I think this is brilliant, particularly if you are working on your own. I think this can be very, very helpful because when you're videoing it, you can see all those small things that you do, even if you're trying really hard not to. So you're leaning, you're holding your breath, you're grabbing onto your pocket or something, and particularly if you're careful about where you put your camera, if you're focusing more on yourself as a example, you may see different like facial expressions that you give, or you can notice that all your mental energy is like, it's there.
Yeah.
Yes, and then we can see why blind searches can be so much harder for our dog because we're telegraphing so much all the time.
Mhm.
Yes, and it's so slight. So just a very quick story that I'll tell, and then we can go to the next image. Is I remember I was teaching my very first. I was a very baby dog trainer. I was teaching my very first basic manners class, and we had taught the first week how to teach sit and whatnot. And this couple came back to class the next week, and they were furious. They just absolutely were so upset. And I was like, "Well, this isn't great." I was like, so hey guys, like, so what's the issue? And the husband could not get this dog to sit, no matter what. But the dog could sit beautifully for the wife. And he was beyond himself. So I was like, okay, well, can you show me what's going on? So he tells the dog to sit, and the dog is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then she tells the dog to sit, and she's just telling the dog to sit beautifully. And the dog sat. I'm like, that's interesting. I'm like, okay, can you go back and tell me how it is that you were doing sit? And I'm like, just say the word. And the dog does nothing. And then I'm like, okay, don't say anything, but ask the dog to sit. And he does this. And the dog sat beautifully because the dog wasn't listening to the word, he was listening to his head. Oh, the guy was so upset. So I'm like, okay, this is what's happening, right?
Yeah.
But that's the perfect thing about this is that a lot of times we're doing things we don't even think about.
Yeah.
And the video with this game is so powerful because it's literally focusing on that. And then we can work on that going on. You guys are just so smart.
We've got a couple other variations as well that people will see if they bought it.
But you've definitely keyed on probably the big portions of this game that I want people to think about. When I teach this one in workshops, I always tell people, because I preface every games workshop with a lot of what's at the beginning of the book, when we talk about ethology and observing animal behavior. And so I tell people, when we play this game, I want you to put your ethologist hat on and watch the handler. Because, man, and again, going back to stress, look at what you do when you're stressed. You know, do you move your feet more? Do you play with your leash? Do you bite your lip? Like, look at these things that you do. We all have little stress habits, and that if we're aware of them, then we can be more aware of our baseline stress levels, which can help us do whatever coping routines we have.
Absolutely. Oh, it's just so good. Such good stuff. So this was a thing that I threw together. So guys, take this with a grain of salt. But this was basically how I thought about potentially combining two of the games. So the Yellow Brick Road, as well as being able to name different items or different spots within the search area. So what I'm trying to show here is if I was playing this on my own with my dog, we would be staying on the Yellow Brick Road, and we'd be able to go in whichever direction, but it's only in one direction. But then depending on how my dog actually hit on, let's say, the hide that's on the little bench, if they hit on it in one direction, I have to come up with a letter starts with B. But if they came at it from another direction, I now have to come up with a word that starts with the letter C, that kind of thing. So this is, I think, one of the ways that we can view these games that Michael and Natalie have put together in such, again, the game book is so good. There's so much inspiration there, and how you're able to combine these games is brilliant. And again, this is just something I slapped together in a couple of minutes. But can you guys talk about how it is that you've combined some of the games, how you've seen some of your students combining the games, and what the value is in doing that?
Yeah, I want to say right before I let Natalie talk that, like, I love what you did here, and that these games really are just templates. Like, really, just play with them. Just be creative. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Leave those distinctions behind for a moment and just play for a second. And you can combine these games into whatever form you want. So
yeah, I love that this is a combination of Purple Leopard and Conveyor Belt, or Yellow Brick Road, depending on if you allow yourself to go back and forth or only take one path. And you could run this just as Conveyor Belt or Yellow Brick Road and just keep yourself to the path. You could do that without it being a group game. That would be easy to set up for oneself. And, but however many hides you want to put out there, it really doesn't matter. It's more about, are you keeping yourself to the path, and are you making sure that you're handling the path and paying attention to your dog, not paying attention to hides, not saying, well, I'm going to slow down at bricks 3 and 4 because I know there's a hide over there on the bench, which is so easy to do subconsciously. And And then throwing purple leopard in here, you get that extra piece of the handler's mind being distracted. And so that also, it may make it easier for them not to handle the hide, or they might handle the hide more because they're forgetting not to because they're thinking about the letters. And so that's awesome.
Absolutely. And in terms of combining games, like the ones that are most natural, it's really natural to add an independence component to any other game. So you can easily...
Both Conveyor Belt and Yellow Brick Road are adding an independence
absolutely
component to a sort of semi-normal, like find as many as you can type of game.
Yes, but you can absolutely have, the same idea, but you have the letters out there, but now you have to be at a distance and you can't move in, and you can easily combine these kinds of things.
Or the opposite. You have to be on a 2-foot leash and your dog has to work it that way.
Absolutely, which, would add the kind of one-track mind idea of adding a distraction, which you could add to this game as well. It's like now we're also going to change what kind of leash you get to use. And really, like a lot of these games are just ways to make normal searches have an extra layer on top of them. And it's up to you how many layers to add. Like most of our students find it difficult to add just one layer, but you add 2 or 3 or 4 layers and it blows their mind. But if you're really good, you can do it. I remember one Easter we had a game where they had to find hides, answer trivia, and at the same time collect different colored Easter eggs. So they had the right number of colors at the end. One student was clever and just found all the hides of the dog, put the dog in a sit, and ran around collecting Easter eggs for the rest of their time. But the rest tried to do all of them at once, and that was super hard. I forgot what I was gonna say. Can you scroll up on our list? Yes. Rubble piles, like great one to add to things.
Yes. So rubble pile, which we talked about in the webinar, is where you have a pile of stuff over a hide and the handler is removing pieces one at a time. And you could add a time limit to that. You could add purple leopard, putting numbers or letters or whatever on things that you have to change, or you have to, we do a spelling bee version of Nose or Trivia sometimes that you could, now that might be.
You can recite poetry while you do it.
Yeah, you can, whatever is in your head, reciting lyrics, reciting poetry, spelling things. I'm sure you could find an app that would spit out spelling words for you that you could then say. That might be even easier to find than finding like trivia to read to yourself. But the trivia game is also something that could be added to anything. And instead of it being individual trivia questions, it can be, okay, I'm going to take the category of dog breeds and I have to go through the alphabet. So how many dog breeds can I think of in A? How many dog breeds can I think of in B? And of course, you can allow yourself, and we always allow this in the group version, to skip things that you can't think of something. In fact, sometimes things you can think of distract you more.
Yeah.
People tend to be more distracted by the spelling bee version than the trivia version, because if they don't know the trivia, they go, oh, pass. I know I don't know that. But they know how to spell most of the words. So then they want to spell them, and then they're getting really engrossed in the spelling piece.
I had one workshop who I talked to them about the trivia game, and, I send them all out of the search area. I set my hides, and out in the parking lot, they all conspired together that like all of the trivia questions were clearly going to be some young guy thing. They were going to all be about Pokemon. That's what they thought. They were going to all be about Pokemon. And so they came in with the decision they weren't going to answer any trivia questions. Fine, that's great. But as soon as they got a question they knew the answer to, they couldn't be not distracted anymore. They're like, oh, I know that answer, and they would just say it, and then they lost it. So.
But this is the brilliant thing about all of these games, is that it is highlighting where we can work and improve upon things for ourselves or our dogs or the team. And that if we aren't basically pushing in the way that you guys are with the games, there's no way of knowing, right? Who would have thought that it could be so incredibly challenging to be doing a search just in your living room with hides that but be able to say the different capitals of different states?
Yeah.
It's like, you wait, what? I can't possibly or even just say the alphabet backwards. Yeah, exactly. Or to mean, and then if you're videoing that, to see what happens to your handling when your brain is
Yep.
trying to do something else. But the fact is that these things represent what can happen at trial, because it is just stress. It is your brain trying to do 5 things at once. It is a, oh God, I have to worry about the time limit, and oh, the judge is looking at me, and oh my God, there are spectators, and oh my God, all this other stuff, right? So that's why
Yes.
the games are brilliant. They're just so incredibly smart.
Yeah,
So
you
was there?
reminded me, sorry, real
Oh
quick,
no, go ahead.
of another way that I like to add a little more challenge to these on your own would be to take something like the Yellow Brick Road, and instead of going around and setting the hides intentionally, go out into the middle and just chuck 5 hides in 5 directions. And you're going to vaguely probably know where they land, but your brain isn't going to remember as well because you didn't think about it. Oh, I'm going to place this under the lip of this thing, and that puts such a cemented picture in your mind. And so you can utilize that throwing, which is an exercise I like for its own sake in a different context, but do that as your hide setting in a lot of these games to make it more like a blind search.
Yeah, and you can do that and go eat lunch and then come back out, and for a lot of you guys, probably it'll be truly blind. And you'll convince yourself, I know I threw one over here by this bush, and then you realize, no, it was that bush over there. And
yeah, that can happen even like 10 seconds after the hides land. So even more so if you spend half an hour doing something else.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my God. So we're just going to go back to this view. So was there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about as far as the book, or anything else you have coming up as we're starting to wrap up? Because you've been so generous with your time with this.
Well, just so people know, there are a few more things in the extra information that we're going to be sending out. So we didn't go through the full list. I think it was better to go into some detail because that I think can help. But those of you who already have the book we're going to be emailing that out. If you don't get it, because it seemed like some email servers weren't so happy with receiving the email from our website,
check your spam, email us.
And then email us, and we'll make sure you get it.
Okay, perfect. And I also want to let everyone know that Michael and Natalie, again, are absolutely fantastic. They have done a number of different presentations with us through Southwark University. So they have different courses and webinars. They've done seminars as well. So we have links inside of the comments. Definitely encourage you guys to check those out. If there's a specific topic that you guys are interested in that you would like for us to be like, hey, we really want to learn more from Michael and Natalie, you let me know and I will talk to them. They're very, very busy people, but we will try to get them in when they actually have a moment to breathe. But I really want to thank you both so very much, because as an instructor, it is amazing what you put together. As someone who plays that work alone, it is so wonderful to have some inspiration for creative things that I can do. And the fact that you've compiled all of this based upon what you've been doing throughout your whole careers is just absolutely incredible. So thank you very, very, very much.
Very welcome. We're glad you're using it.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or were you guys all set for today?
I think we're good.
I think that's good. Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you so very much. We really appreciate you all for joining us for this live stream. We'll be scheduling some more in the future. If there are other topics you're interested, please let me know. But otherwise, go enjoy your puppies. Go play some games. Buy the book first, then go play some games. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your day.